Hey now, you're an all-star. We're still recording. Go play.
Hi friends, welcome back to NotAgain, the podcast that brings college-level analysis to preschool-level content. I'm one of your hosts, Rebecca.
I'm your other host, Alan.
And today we are finishing up our talk with the treatment of autism spectrum disorder in the entertainment media, which is definitely different from our usual. So while I encourage you to listen to this episode, please understand that the topics are going to be a little different this time.
It's different than our regular.
There's not going to be a previously on because you don't need to have heard the last episode to understand what we're talking about this time, but I do encourage you to go listen to the last episode if you want to hear more about this topic. So last time we covered webcomics and, your mini host Ari is here, chomping away. So we talked about webcomics and books, and I just wanted to finish up talking about that because I forgot to say my favorite line from The Life We Bury by Alan Eskins. It has nothing to do with autism spectrum disorder, but it's so funny. I have to look. I can make fun of a widely successful published author. Okay, what am I going to do? Like, you should buy this book and read it for how funny some of the descriptors are. Like, there you go. See, I'm advertising it. On page 26 of my copy, the narrator Joe is describing the attractiveness differences between himself and his younger brother, and he says, "About the time he turned 14, he surpassed me in height, weight, and looks. His golden hair curled around his head with a Nordic swirl, where my dirty blonde hair stuck out like straw if I didn't tame it with a touch of hair gel. His jaw was square, with a boyish dimple on the tip, where my chin was forgettable." And I cracked up when I read that. Like, this is such a great example of like an author thinking they're being really poignant and profound, and me just being like, that is hilarious. Like, whose chin is memorable?
Well, even if it is memorable, that's the rare thing, right? To have a memorable chin.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Jay Leno has a memorable chin.
And ask any police sketch artist, they'll be like, what was his chin like?
Yeah. Like, I looked into his eyes. I remember he had, an interesting nose, but like his chin?
Nobody really thinks too much about the chin.
Oh, my chin's so forgettable.
I'm so sad about it.
So I just wanted to end with that, our discussion of the books. I forgot to talk about it last time. And then I just want to do a quick, like PSA, I guess. My mom reminded me to talk about this. So it's technically not it's not kind to talk about people who are on the spectrum as being, quote, autistic. And I know we do that sometimes. The reason is that we don't like to define people by their mental disorder or diagnosis. So for the same reason, you're not supposed to say someone is schizophrenic. And I get that totally. And I do apologize if we offended anybody. It's just sometimes a little bit quicker to say autistic than on the spectrum or diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
A person with autism.
Yeah, but you'll notice that anytime we talk about Warren, we say he's on the spectrum. Is just a little bit more, I hate to say it, but politically correct. So I'm sorry if we offended anyone. We do tend to just kind of do a mix. Sometimes I say autistic. In the case of Steve Asbell, who I still don't know how to say his last name, his profile on Twitter says #actually autistic. That's why I said it. It's a hashtag because I think that people want to be able to say, like, I am part of this discourse. Like, I am an authority on this, and that's great. We are going to today start talking about, and hopefully finish talking about, I don't want this to be a third episode, movies and television shows and how they treat people who are on the spectrum. And I have a lot to say about the show known as Atypical. I don't know why I said known as, like, that's what it's titled, so that's why it's known as that.
It's known as that for a reason.
It's like saying I'm known as Rebecca, like, that's because that's my name. Because I have so much to say about that, I want to push it back because I just want to make sure we get through some other things first. Yeah. I thought it would be nice to start talking about TV shows, then moving on to movies.
Sure. Well, yeah, we have a little list here, right?
Yeah, we have our list. It's in no particular order. But you and I were going to talk about a lot of stuff, and I think there was something that we were gonna start with, and I said last time, this would be fun to start with this, and then I completely forgot what we were going to. So forget it. Yeah. Let's start with TV shows in no particular order. I'll pop into Big Mouth because I have a quote for Big Mouth. So Big Mouth is controversial for a lot of reasons. I haven't looked into it at all. I'm just guessing. So one, Big Mouth is graphic with its portrayal of sex, sexuality, sexual organs.
Yeah. It's about puberty,
menstruation.
Mostly. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I do have some nitpicks about the show and some hangups about the show, like, that do not detract from the fact that I like it overall. So what I would say is I like it overall, and I like what it's trying to do because it's really relatable. And I think that it's better to talk about these taboo topics. Shout out to Taboos. Let's do an episode about Big Mouth. Go listen to Taboos. But it, oh man, that was supposed to be a Patreon. Oh, well, whatever. That one's for free, Taboos. You know, it talks about a lot of taboos, and I think that it would make it less taboo for young women to talk about menstruation, or for just young people to explore their sexuality and what sexuality means.
A lot of people are just kind of left out in the wilderness. Like, their parents don't talk about it. They don't have
their society doesn't talk about it.
They don't have friends that are like kind of open with it. So it's just a lot of people are just kind of lost. They like don't even know what's going on. They don't know who to ask. They don't know how to ask.
Yes, and I think that the show's really realistic in its portrayal of like middle school, and I actually really do love the idea of the concept of kind of like literally personifying puberty as monsters that follow kids around and kind of go like, oh, do this or talk like that, because puberty is kind of a monster that you're scared of, but you kind of need in your life, and you're a little intrigued by it, and they're kind of your friend but kind of not. It's like a love-hate relationship, and all of that's portrayed really well with the puberty monsters, which is what they're called. But what I want to talk about is the character Caleb. Caleb is nice blorp. Caleb, no, that was directed at Ari, not my husband.
I've gotten control of my
Your blorping.
my drooling already. So she's talking about Ari.
So Caleb is on the spectrum, and I have a couple things to say about that. Number one, he is a character who is not explicitly stated to be on the spectrum. Unlike what we'll get to with Power Rangers, which I really like, that character is explicitly stated to be on the spectrum. So Caleb, I looked on the wiki for Big Mouth, and it actually had a section labeled mental disorders, and underneath that it says autism, and it doesn't say autism spectrum disorder, but you get it. And it says Caleb appears to have some kind of mental disorder. I didn't like that until, oh, are you sneezing? Sorry. It says Caleb appears to have some kind of mental disorder, which I didn't really like the wording of that, but I realized that they're saying that because, they were saying that because the next line is, although the exact disorder remains unspecified. So what they're saying is we can intuit that he is on the spectrum, but it is never specified. It is likely to be Asperger's or autism. There are many traits of Caleb's character that support these claims. Caleb is socially inept and has problems fitting in with other kids. He talks with a flat, monotonous voice. He doesn't express a lot of emotion. He lacks the ability to understand other people's emotions, etc. And so he is a character who's on the spectrum, even though it's never explicitly stated. Yeah. And the introduction of the character is they're on a bus to a field trip, and the puberty monster says to John Mulaney's character, Andrew, don't sit with the kid with the rolly backpack. He can't read social cues. And then Caleb waves at the puberty monster and says hi. And he says, the puberty monster says, oh, hi, Caleb. And that's how you know who he is.
Yeah, that's a little bit awkward because, like, I don't really think that's how kids that age would say that.
Well, here's the thing. It's awkward and it's disparaging.
Yeah.
And like I said, I like a lot of this show, but its treatment of puberty and maturation and childhood growth, all really good. Family issues, very good. I think that it shows like the character Jessie struggling with divorce really spoke to me because, I had the same struggles at almost the exact same time. But to introduce this character, one, kids know what on the spectrum means. They know what autism is by middle school at this point in time. And two, to introduce this character by like, oh, don't sit with him. He can't read social cues. It's like a way of talking around autism.
Yeah.
And you have something to say?
Well, just
while Radar messes around in the background here. Oh, he's lying down now.
Just on your point, like, he can't read social cues, so you can't sit next to him. Like, so he'll look out the window. Like what is he doesn't like smell bad,
Lots of kids have trouble making friends, you said?
Yeah. Well, all right. So yeah, lots of kids have trouble making friends. Lots of kids have flat affects. Maybe they just be shy. They don't want to stand out. They're really nervous around other people. So they don't want to be animated, or they don't want to, they don't want their voice to crack or something. So they're just like, okay, well, I'll just
middle school is awkward for everyone.
Yeah, I'll just like stay calm and like, lots of kids are awkward around people. They're just shy and nervous. Like, oh, can't read social cues. No, they're just scared out of their mind. So this is kind of like rather than just calling it what it is and saying like, oh, we're kind of talking around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and then the very next time, So what his introduction, I went back and watched the episode to get a direct quote. I don't remember like the very next time we see him, but one of the next big moments with him is the character Jesse is very angry, and Caleb holds up an emotion chart and identifies that she's furious from the emotion chart. Yeah. And that is supposed to be a joke. Yeah. And I want to compare it to the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, where he very like casually explains that he does have help at school to identify complex emotions, and that he gets happy and sad just fine, but like gets a little bit more confused when he gets to confusion or things that are a little more complex. But he's explaining why it's hard for himself as opposed to it being a joke. Yeah. So my thought was I watched all 4 seasons, I binged it. And my hope was that they realized what they were doing and that they would treat the character better. And they kind of backed themselves into a corner with that, because they can't just nix him from the show, right? They can't be like, oops, we did a bad, let's just not use his character, because that's worse, right? To just write out the character who's on the spectrum. But they also couldn't just change the way he was entirely, because people would, you know what I mean? They couldn't change his character. So what they did is, I think the best they could, in later seasons, he has more of a role.
Okay.
And so he still speaks in his monotone, but he's helping out with Matthew's, I think the character's Matthew's like news show, and he has more of a speaking part. And so it's not perfect, but I think they realized kind of what they were doing.
Okay.
And they pulled back a little bit on it with like using the autism spectrum disorder stuff as a joke, as the punchline. Mm-hmm. So that's my assessment of Caleb. There is some very graphic stuff on Big Mouth, I will say this. And so people don't like it. There's also a trans character played by a trans person. So that's awesome. Like, I think that overall they're trying for representation, and they're trying to be honest and make a show about what everybody thinks and feels about, but like doesn't like think it's okay to talk about. And so that's and yes, it's still problematic. And I would say listen to like actual, other people, like people on the spectrum and people who are LGBTQ. And like for I can't assess how well these characters were treated.
Don't just listen to us.
Don't just listen to us. So that's that. Okay. Yes.
I think this kind of leads me into what I was going to talk about in House.
Great. Go for it.
Because about just kind of like people should know what autism is by now.
Yes.
And so,
so before you continue, it's season 3 of House, or House MD, I guess is the actual show title. Episode 4, the episode is titled Lines in the Sand. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So the portrayal here is I'm not going to really talk about that. It's a child actor doing their best. I think they probably did a pretty good job given that context. But what I really want to talk about is there's a framing device around the whole episode where Wilson gets his house doctor friend, his only friend, gets the idea in his head that House might have Asperger's syndrome.
Oh, really? I don't remember this.
And so speaking of should know better, these are medical doctors.
Yes.
And so he's talking to Cuddy like, oh, maybe House is on the spectrum, and that's why he's so irascible. And it's like that's not what autism is. No,
and actually, this is a Sherlock Holmes show. A lot of people speculate that Sherlock Holmes, the character, may have been on the spectrum. Yeah. In the show Sherlock, the BBC one, it's BBC, right?
I think
whatever,
so.
The British one. Sorry, British people. He identifies as a high-functioning sociopath, and that is more accurate. So if people are wondering why we're not talking about Sherlock Holmes, it's because honestly, the portrayals that I have seen make him kind of antisocial, not antisocial personality disorder, but antisocial and not on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so House is antisocial. He's a sociopath.
Yeah, he's a misanthrope.
He's a misanthrope.
All that sort of stuff. So
he's certainly not on the spectrum.
He is not. And they do reach that conclusion by the end of the episode. But then again, these are medical doctors. They've all had a psych rotation that is required. When you're going through your rotation.
And even so, even if they didn't do a psych rotation, I'm a person who's not a doctor in any way, shape, or form, and I can tell.
Yeah.
So they should know more than me. Also, by the way, we don't know. We're not. I did this disclaimer last episode, but I forgot to do it now, so I'm doing it now. We are not doctors, therapists, Alan is a doctor, but a PhD in chemistry doctor, not a medical doctor. His PhD is awesome, but it certainly does not qualify him to give you advice on medicine or psychology or anything. So this is us discussing it, but not giving advice or acting like authorities on it, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So and then of course his treatment of that kid who was on the spectrum in that episode was terrible.
Yeah. It was all just like, he was very kind of like subhuman. He even says at one point, just like, oh, monkey see, monkey do, and stuff like that. But then again, he's supposed to be the world's biggest dingbat, so.
Yeah, it's weird. So, like, it's the same thing almost as with he sighed like a dog. It's like monkey see, monkey do is an expression. And yet when you are specifically using that analogy or idiom with reference to a person who's on the spectrum, again, you are dehumanizing them. And again, are we supposed to be... Are we, quote unquote, allowed to be upset by that, given that House is terrible to everybody? It is unclear.
Yeah, he's the hero of the show, though. He's supposed
an anti-hero.
Yeah, but you're supposed to love the anti-hero, and so no,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work for me.
I have a lot of problems with House in general, but like also watched a lot of it, so I can't complain too much. You know, it was entertaining. It's just not great.
Yeah. Anytime I ever see like part of an episode, I immediately remember what the twist ending is, though, and then I can't watch it.
Yeah. Well,
because I just when
like, Chase kisses.
Oh, he swallowed
girl
a toothpick. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like I can't watch it because like, oh yeah, they're just gonna find it eventually.
There's so much questionable ethical stuff going on too, like stuff that would just never. Anyway.
Yeah.
This isn't a medical show, so that's House. I want to talk now about the idea of having a person who is not on the spectrum, playing a character who is. And this happens explicitly in a lot of shows, I'm sure. But specifically, I want to talk about The Good Doctor with Freddie Highmore and Atypical with, I can't pronounce his name. I will try my best. And I'm just, somebody correct me with however you want to do that. Tweet at NotAgainPod or whatever. But his name is Keir Gilchrist.
Keir, yeah.
Keir is, I'm going to go with that. He's an English-born Canadian actor known for blah, 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 right? And he is also not on the spectrum. And so the first thing I want to talk about is like the ethics of having somebody who is not on the spectrum play somebody who is, because at what point does it become kind of a mockery, right?
Yeah.
At what point is it somebody imitating somebody with a mental disorder? And we have to talk about the fact that Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, I think he was either nominated for or got an Academy Award for his portrayal of a person on the spectrum. Yeah. And so like, and then like we have gay people playing straight people playing gay people, which we're okay with. Supposedly LGBTQ community, get at me. Are we okay with that? Like, you know, it's not okay when we have whitewashing, for instance, like in Doctor Strange or Ghost in the Shell. And it's not okay when we have somebody who is not of a certain race. I never like playing another, like we talked about already, Mickey Rooney, you know, that's not okay, obviously. So where do we land with people who are on the spectrum? Both of these shows ostensibly are saying, we'll get into it, but ostensibly are saying, you know, people on the spectrum can achieve so much. And yet they are saying that they cannot by not casting people on the spectrum. You know what I mean? And this happens in Power Rangers too. I don't believe the actor, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the actor who plays Billy is on the spectrum. But like, if you're saying, look how well, you know, these people can function in society, stop being bigoted against them, all of that, well, why didn't you cast people who are on the spectrum then? And if you're looking at, we're looking for people who are very severely on the spectrum, at least cast somebody who is less severely on the spectrum, someone who can act it because they feel it. You know what I mean?
Or have some life experience with it, you know? Like,
yes. You know, and not just somebody. So what they say for The Good Doctor, which I do not like, and we have, our son Warren had early intervention from before he started preschool, and our early interventionist did not like the portrayal of the Good Doctor. So that I find it funny that the Good Housekeeping article I found is titled "The Good Doctor star Freddie Highmore opens up about playing someone with autism on TV," and then the subtitle is "The 28-year-old actor has been applauded for his portrayal of Dr. Sean Murphy." Questionable. I don't know who's applauding because I'm not.
That's sort of one of those statements that you know is always going to be true, though, right? So you can say it no matter what. Like somebody somewhere must have clapped at some point, so you can be like, I don't need to check.
But were they people who are on the spectrum
Probably
who were applauding?
not. Just
That's what I want to know.
They get the B- on AV Club for one episode, and they're like, applauded. You know?
So here are the bullet points they had. The Good Doctor stars actor Freddie Highmore as Dr. Sean Murphy, a surgical resident with autism. By the way, Freddie Highmore is British and playing an American person, and that happens all the time too. So we're okay with that. But that's not a mental disorder being American. Well, I mean,
maybe no.
Yeah. Anyway,
just a joke.
That was a horrible joke. I'm sorry. But we are seeing Americans acting in horrible ways. But in real life, Freddie does not have autism. Freddie does lots of research and works closely with an autism consultant to help him with his role. I'm hoping the autism consultant is somebody who's on the spectrum. And so I don't know how I feel about that. I watched that show and then couldn't anymore for two reasons. One, the show is supposedly asserting that somebody who's on the spectrum can be a doctor and fulfill their dreams, and look how smart he is, and he just, he will achieve. But then every single episode is centered around the drama caused by him being on the spectrum. And it's almost like the show is saying, look, he can do it, except that he can't. And I didn't like that at all. Whether the portrayal was accurate or not, I think it was a step back.
Yeah, it sort of seems like they proved their point in the first episode when he was already a doctor who had achieved their dreams. And and then every episode just had to have been like him proving it again. I guess.
And he often messed things up. The only reason that he didn't get fired is he then unmessed them up himself. You know what I mean? He caused problem. I don't know. He's supposed to be like a savant who's really helpful, but at one point they move him to a lab for diagnostic purposes where it's lower stress but still helpful, and he can take his time. And he had a companion who really liked him, and I was like, this would be a great place for him. Well, yeah, it's like he's not in a high stress situation that could cause a breakdown, as has happened in the show. I'm not saying it would. The show said it would. He kept having breakdowns and periods of inactivity where he shut down because he couldn't cope. And half the show was then him not the show, but several episodes were him trying to get back to where he wanted to be in surgery. And I don't know.
This has almost nothing to do with autism. It's just sort of human resources 101 is you just think about where people are best suited for, and how you can maximize, what help they can be. And just to doing surgery, there's lots of things you could do with surgery that you're part of a team. He
was brought in to help diagnose several times before.
Yeah, so it's just just utilize it properly.
Yeah. And the villain of the show is he's on the spectrum, he can't do this. But he kept being proved right every time Sean broke down in a really high stress situation. So it's the show was trying to be yay, diversity. And hey, at least they said he is on the spectrum, as opposed to all the shows we're going to talk about that do not say it. And they just code someone autistic. But I think it's poorly executed, in my opinion. I want to say, this is going to come up with Atypical. Just because I am criticizing something does not mean I'm criticizing the people who like it or saying that you are wrong for liking it, ever. That's never my point. People get to enjoy what they enjoy. Every time, unless of course it's racist or something, don't enjoy hurting people, but entertainment wise, if you like a show, go for it. And then I guess we have to talk about Atypical now. I think that if they're going to make the assertion that people on the spectrum are capable people, then they should have people on the spectrum playing those characters. I watched 2 episodes of Atypical, mostly by accident, because I thought it was an hour-long show, and I missed it when it transferred from episode 1 to episode 2. It turns out it's a half hour or whatever. Atypical follows a young man of 18 who is on the spectrum and wants to get a girlfriend. And that's all I've got so far. Okay. I know his sister, who's apparently a sophomore in high school, is played by someone who was 23 at time of filming that first season, so yay. And it was obvious when they said she was a sophomore, I snort giggled. Okay, so let me just go through my notes right here. Number 1, we're going to get back to this, but the main character, Sam, has a best friend, Zahid, who is a womanizer it's one of those horrible tropes where he's a nerd who like overcompensates for being nerdy by womanizing and being like, I got so much bleep last night. I can't say it. It's a PG podcast and stuff like that. So there's a cute girl. They work in like an Office Depot-esque store, and she's a cute girl. She's looking at him. And so his friend says, smile back at her. And he doesn't know how to smile, apparently. And so he does this really wide, horrible grimace, and she is turned off by it and runs away. And again, this whole show is like, yay, we're in support of people on the spectrum, but also a lot of the humor is going to be at the expense of this person on the spectrum. Also, this one I don't know, but I have taught so many students on the spectrum, like in high school, and some of them have paraprofessionals with them when needed. And this is, by the way, a character who would need a para, just, for help with coping and keeping organized and stuff like that. But he doesn't have a para, and I don't know if that's because of the public school system or just because the show didn't do enough research or they didn't want to hire the actor or whatever. But of all the students I've taught, I've never met one who didn't know how to smile.
Doesn't know what a smile looks like.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we're very fortunate with Warren because he's such a cuddle bug. Like, he's always giggling and laughing and cuddling with us. So he's sensory seeking, which is a little bit easier. I know that those who, on the spectrum who are sensory avoidant, it's hard because you can't cuddle with them. That would be like Curious Incident of the Dog. The nighttime, he prefers like pressing his hand against somebody else's hand rather than a hug. And so we are fortunate that Warren is such a cuddle lover, but like so he smiles a lot. So I'm not using just Warren as an example. Like, I have taught teenagers on the spectrum and they all know what a smile is, so if I'm wrong about this, you can tweet at me, but I'm pretty sure that was a horrible thing to insinuate. It's like, I don't understand emotions to the point where I can't smile. Ew. Okay. Then, yes, we already talked about neurotypical people playing neurodivergent people. There's an evil mom who doesn't think that he can do things. I don't know what else to say about that. His mom is like, he can't have a girlfriend. She's like overprotective, I guess. And again, we're treating autism like it's some sort of foreign concept in this show. Like, people don't get it. And it's just like, I know that we're learning new stuff every day about the spectrum and the disorder and all that, but like, in this decade, students know it's the Caleb problem all over again. They know what it is, more or less. Like, I think that they get to some real emotional moments on this show. He tries to be intimate with a woman who asks if he is the R word, which I know is a huge like stigma. Is like kind of associating autism with being mentally challenged, and then again just stigmatizing people who are mentally challenged and using that horrible word. And so I know that, and then the parents' emotional like struggles, like struggling to connect with their child. So I do empathize with that. Like, parents trying to be the best parents for their son who's on the spectrum. I get that. And I think that they do touch on some really good ideas there. Because you want to be able to connect with your child. You want to be the best possible parent for them. Absolutely. But we also have his psychiatrist, or they call her a therapist, so I don't know what her credentials are, at the beginning, who very blatantly like tells somebody that she knows is severely on the spectrum, like, you can date, put yourself out there. And he's like, what does that mean, put myself out there? And then she's like, oop, out of time. Okay, bye. And it's like, you should know that that's probably not the best way to go about that. And also, and I talked to my mom, who's a therapist, about this, just to confirm, before she like sends him on his way, she's like, can you donate your brain to science? Like, no forms, no parents present. He is 18, but like, clearly she should know that his parents should be present for a discussion like this.
Discussion about that, yeah.
Like, she's just like, we don't have a lot of, human brains to study, and, would you donate yours? And like, okay, do not like. And then she's also lecturing about autism spectrum disorder later at like a college. And she's like, they can be doing this or that or the other thing. I knew one person who knew 95 different ways to cook an egg. And she's like laughing about it. I do not like this show. As you can tell, like, she should not be. I think it was supposed to be like, hey, isn't that fascinating? Except it played like she was like, oh, isn't that cute? They think they're people.
This is really weird.
I don't like it at all. And then this has nothing to do with autism, but there's a scene with the older sister where she discovers that some mean kids have painted the word orca on a girl's locker, and this girl is like somewhat overweight. And then there were just a bunch of kids standing around laughing like it's the funniest thing they've ever seen and filming literally a closed locker with their phones and taking pictures of it. And I'm like, yeah, kids are cruel, but like this isn't even that, like what? I don't know how to say it.
I don't know. Like that's really strange. Aren't orcas kind of cool?
Yes.
Like I don't know.
Like whale would have been, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
Like, not everybody knows that an orca is actually a species of dolphin and not a whale. But like it wasn't funny to me. And like the girl whose locker it was standing there like looking sad outside the crowd, but they weren't teasing her explicitly or filming her or anything. They were just standing around her locker. And then of course the older sister punches out one of the girls who's like, you know, it's a thing, okay. But like, and like, yay, I'm glad that we are anti-fat shaming.
That's why that was written, is so that the older sister could punch somebody out.
I want to say it is very strange of me to be like, they should do bullies better. You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad that they didn't have more explicit bullying and fat shaming.
Yeah, you don't want to give anybody ideas, but like, come on, man. Kids are better at bullying than that.
It was just weird that they were so amused by this one word on a stationary locker that nobody was standing by. Like, so anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to say I was like the best kid in high school, but if I saw that, I wouldn't be like, haha, point and laugh. I'd just be like, yeesh, Christ, like, what happened there?
I would have just like shrugged. I didn't even get, it took me so long to figure it out because again, orcas are just cool and I don't, you know, so I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, is it like a fat thing? Are they fat shaming? It like took me a while. And if I'd seen that in high school, I probably would have just seen if I could clean it up. And if I couldn't, I would have like gone to get an adult. So Alan decided to take the fussy baby for a walk, which is fine because he hasn't really seen this show and I'm just going to be talking at him anyway. So let's pretend Alan's still here having me talk at him. Nothing much is changing because I still talk too much. But the dad on this show, on Atypical, his son says he wants to get his psychiatrist to be his girlfriend. The psychiatrist is 26, and also he doesn't say he wants it to be a psychiatrist. This happens later when Sam literally breaks into her house because he doesn't get that he shouldn't. And again, I really cannot stand the way they're portraying autism here. So he just says, I want to be some girl's boyfriend, but she has a boyfriend already. And his dad says, your mom had a boyfriend when I first knew her. And he essentially says, I just hung around her until she got with me. And then later he says, oh, no. Like I didn't, she still shot me down like 10 times, even after she broke up with her boyfriend. And so like, we have this kind of like incel, like friend zone thing that I hate, where it was just like, perpetuating this idea that if you like a girl, even if whether she's with a boyfriend or not is almost like irrelevant, but like you just hang around her enough and ask her out enough and you'll wear her down. And like their relationship isn't that great to begin with, but it's awful to hear him say that. And then of course, like he's saying it to his son who has been shown to not understand nuance or whatever in terrible ways by this show. And it's awful. So his friend Zahid is trying to counsel him on how to get a girlfriend. And the joke is he's terrible at dealing with women and interacting with women. But the character who's on the spectrum doesn't get that because he doesn't get social interaction. So he thinks that Zahid is a great role model. Ha ha. Again, we're being asked to laugh at autism spectrum disorder. But Zahid, at his job, while wearing the uniform of the place that he works, sees an attractive woman with her boyfriend across the room and says, watch and learn or something like that, and goes up to her and starts explicitly sexually harassing her. And it does not matter that she has a boyfriend with her or not. Either way, it is so ridiculously inappropriate. It is to the point he's like dancing around her and close to her. And it's played for laughs, which is awful because if that happened to me in a store, I would call the police. Like, this isn't a Karen thing. It isn't like he came up and said hi and I didn't like the way he said hi. Let me talk to your manager. It was sexual harassment. And it was played for laughs. And that has nothing to do with autism spectrum disorder, except for the fact that, again, we're supposed to see that Sam thinks that this is a good thing to do or whatever. But I just need to point out that I was not okay with. And again, to perpetuate this idea that somebody is, quote, nerdy, and so therefore does not know how to interact with women, and then on top of that, Zahid is a person of color And so, if you're going to have a person of color on your show, maybe don't make him the sexual harasser. Portray them well, since, we're trying for diversity here. And so, I wrote in my notes, haha, he has ASD, so he needs this kind of advice, but he's getting bad advice, but he doesn't know it's bad because of aforementioned ASD. So, we're supposed to, I didn't actually think it was haha. I'm saying that's what the show wants us to be thinking, and I hate that. And, so that is my thoughts on Atypical. And let's just say I will not be continuing my watch of it. And we are kind of already going over time, and I wanted to talk more about movies. And also Gilmore Girls. And so, I think that we're either going to have to cut this off or actually do one more episode of just talking about autism spectrum disorder, which I'm okay with. I love talking about psychology, and I'm so much more aware of all of this stuff that I wouldn't have been aware of before Warren. And so I want to talk about it. I want to bring it into public awareness. And so when we come back, I think that we'll talk about RJ Seiler, who plays Billy. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna get Alan back here. We'll do the sign off, and we'll just come back at you one more time to talk about Gilmore Girls, The Good Place, and 2 different versions of Star Trek, Stranger Than Fiction, and Power Rangers, and maybe 1 or 2 other things. And then we'll be done with this and go back to overanalyzing kids' shows. So I'm going to go get Alan back, and we're going to do our sign off, and then we'll see you next week. Okay, I got Alan back for the sign off. Normally I would talk about our social media extensively and all our stuff, Patreon, Ko-fi, the podcast reviews I do at Beck's Goose. I guess I'm talking about it. Follow us at NotAgain Pod on Twitter. Follow me at Beck's Goose for podcast reviews. Find our Patreon and Ko-fi links in the description. And we will talk about autism spectrum disorder one more time, I think, next week. It's our podcast. Let's do it. Why not? So until next time, thank you very much for helping us to maintain our marbles for one more week. I'm Rebecca.
I'm Alan.
And we'll see you next time. Bye, friends.
Bye.